The Quiet Panic. Alright, so this is something I've been putting off talking about for months now. But after what happened 3 nights ago, I can't keep this to myself anymore. I need to tell someone about this, and honestly, you guys are probably the only ones who won't think I'm completely losing my mind. So here's the thing. Every single night for the past 4 months when I sit down to eat dinner at my kitchen table, there's a family sitting there with me. But here's where it gets weird. It's never the same family twice. One night it might be a mom, dad, and 2 kids. The next night it could be an elderly couple. Sometimes it's just a single parent with a baby. But they're always there, always eating, always talking to each other like I don't even exist. Now, before you click off thinking this is some made-up ghost story, let me be crystal clear about something. I can see them, I can hear them, I can even smell their food. But when I try to interact with them, when I try to talk to them or even just wave, they act like I'm not there. It's like I'm watching a movie that's being projected right into my dining room, except this movie changes every single night and it's been playing for 4 months straight. The whole thing started back in March. I had just moved into this house after my divorce was finalized. It's this old Victorian place that I got for way below market value, which should have been my first red flag. But I was desperate to get out of my apartment and start fresh somewhere new. The real estate agent kept emphasizing how much character the place had, how it was built in 1892, how it had been lovingly maintained by the same family for generations. What she didn't mention was why that family suddenly decided to sell after all those years. The first few weeks living there were completely normal. I was still unpacking boxes, still getting used to the creaky floors and the weird way the pipes rattled when you turned on the hot water. I'd eat dinner in front of the TV in the living room most nights because the dining room felt too big, too formal for just me. But then one evening in late March, I decided to actually use the dining room table for once. I made myself a simple pasta dish, poured a glass of wine, and sat down at the head of this massive oak table that came with the house. That's when I saw them for the first time. A man in his 30s wearing a blue button-down shirt. A woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. And 2 kids who couldn't have been older than 8 or 9. They were sitting at the other end of the table, passing around what looked like a casserole dish, talking about their day. The little girl was complaining about her math homework, and the boy was telling some story about his friend at school. Just a completely normal family dinner conversation. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. I had been under a lot of stress with the divorce and the move, barely sleeping, living off coffee and takeout for weeks. I rubbed my eyes, blinked hard, even pinched myself like you see in movies. But they were still there, clear as day, continuing their meal like nothing had happened. I tried saying hello, but none of them even looked in my direction. I waved my hand, knocked on the table, even stood up and walked over to where they were sitting. Nothing. It was like I was invisible to them. After about 20 minutes, they just faded away. Not all at once, but gradually, like someone was slowly turning down the brightness on a TV screen until they disappeared completely. I sat there for another hour, staring at that empty end of the table, wondering if I was having some kind of mental breakdown. The next night, I convinced myself it had been a stress-induced hallucination. I ate dinner in the living room again, avoiding the dining room entirely. But the night after that, curiosity got the better of me. I made dinner and deliberately sat at the dining room table, waiting to see if anything would happen. And sure enough, right around 7:30, they appeared again. But this time it wasn't the same family. This time it was an older couple, probably in their 70s. The woman was wearing a floral dress and the man had on a cardigan sweater. They were eating what looked like pot roast with vegetables, and they were discussing their grandchildren, planning a visit for the upcoming weekend. Same deal as before, they could see and interact with each other perfectly, but I might as well have been a ghost sitting at my own table. That's when I realized this wasn't just a one-time thing. This was something that was going to keep happening night after night, and I was right. For the past 4 months, every single evening when I sit down for dinner, a different family materializes at the other end of my table. Sometimes it's a young couple on what seems like a first date, nervous and making awkward small talk. Sometimes it's a single mom feeding a toddler who keeps throwing food on the floor. I've seen families celebrating birthdays, families arguing about money, families sitting in complete silence because they're all glued to their phones. The weird part is, and I know this sounds crazy, but I've started to look forward to it. After eating alone for months following my divorce, having these phantom dinner companions has become oddly comforting. Even though they can't see me, even though I can't participate in their conversations, there's something soothing about not eating in complete silence every night. I've started timing my dinners around 7:30 because that's when they usually show up. I've tried everything to figure out what's causing this. I've researched the history of the house, talked to neighbors about the previous owners, even contacted a few paranormal investigators, though none of them took me seriously enough to actually come check it out. The neighbors were friendly but didn't know much about the family who lived here before me. All they could tell me was that it was an elderly woman named Margaret who lived alone for the last decade after her husband passed away. She apparently kept to herself mostly, but was always polite when they saw her working in the garden. What really bothers me is that I can't find any record of Margaret having family dinners in that room. If these are somehow residual memories or energy from past events, where are all these different families coming from? Margaret lived alone. Her husband died 10 years ago. So why am I seeing dozens of different families, different time periods based on their clothing and the way they talk? Some of them seem like they're from the 50s or 60s based on their mannerisms and the phrases they use. 3 nights ago, something different happened that's made me realize I need to start documenting all of this more carefully. Instead of just watching passively like I usually do, I decided to try something new. I set up my phone to record the dinner, thinking maybe if I could capture evidence of what I'm seeing, I could prove to myself that I'm not completely losing my mind. But when I played back the recording, all I saw was myself sitting alone at the table, occasionally looking toward the other end and nodding like I was listening to a conversation. On the video, I look completely insane, talking to empty air, reacting to voices that aren't there. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. That night it was a family of 5. 3 kids all talking over each other while their parents tried to maintain some semblance of order during the meal. The strangest part about that particular night was that one of the kids, a little boy who couldn't have been more than 6 years old, looked directly at me for just a split second. Our eyes met across the table and he smiled and waved before turning back to his siblings. It was the first time in 4 months that any of these phantom dinner guests had acknowledged my existence in any way. That's when I knew I had to start paying closer attention to what's happening here. Because if that little boy could see me even for just a moment, then maybe there's more to this than just my mind playing tricks on me. So I started keeping a journal, writing down every detail about each family that appears. What they're wearing, what they're eating, what they talk about, how long they stay. And the patterns I've discovered are honestly more disturbing than the phenomenon itself. First off, none of these families are random. After going back through my notes, I realized that every single family follows the same routine. They sit down at exactly 7:28, they eat for precisely 37 minutes, and they fade away at exactly 8:05. Every night without fail. It's like watching the same movie with different actors, but the timing never changes. Second, their conversations aren't just casual dinner talk. They're always discussing something significant: life changes, major decisions, family conflicts, celebrations. I've heard divorce announcements, pregnancy reveals, job loss discussions, college acceptance celebrations. It's like I'm witnessing the most important dinner conversations these families ever had. But here's what really gets to me. Last week I started recognizing some of the people, not the same families repeating, but individual people showing up in different family configurations. The woman with the dark ponytail who I saw with her husband and 2 kids in March. She appeared again last Tuesday, but this time she was a single mother with just 1 child, looking about 10 years older and far more tired. The elderly man in the cardigan showed up again, but instead of being with his wife, he was eating alone while talking on an old rotary phone to someone who sounded like his daughter. It's like I'm seeing different chapters of the same people's lives, but completely out of order. And that terrifies me because it suggests these aren't just random spirits or energy imprints. There's something deliberate about what I'm witnessing. Something that's specifically choosing which moments to show me. The night before last, things escalated in a way that made me seriously consider packing up and leaving this house forever. I was eating my usual dinner, watching what appeared to be a family celebrating their teenage son's birthday, when the power went out. The whole house went dark except for the dining room, which somehow remained dimly lit by what seemed like candlelight, even though I don't own any candles. The family kept eating like nothing had happened, but their conversation changed. Instead of talking about the birthday boy's plans for college, they started talking about me. The father looked in my direction and said, "He's been watching us for months now. Don't you think it's time we acknowledged him properly?" The mother nodded and replied, "Margaret always said the new owner would need time to adjust. But he's ready now." That's when every single person at the table turned to look directly at me. The birthday boy, who couldn't have been older than 17, smiled and said, Welcome to the family dinner, sir. We've been waiting for you to join us. I dropped my fork and practically ran out of the room. I spent the rest of the night in my car in the driveway, too scared to go back inside. When I finally worked up the courage to return the next morning, everything was normal. The power was back on. The dining room looked exactly like it always does, and there was no sign that anything unusual had happened. But I found something that made my blood run cold. On the dining room table, right where I had been sitting, was a handwritten note that definitely wasn't there before. In neat, elderly handwriting, it said, "Dear new resident, the dinner table has been the heart of this home for over a century. Every important conversation, every family milestone, every moment of joy and sorrow has been shared here. The table remembers everything. And now it wants to share those memories with you. Don't be afraid. You're part of the family now. Sincerely, Margaret." I've been avoiding the dining room ever since, eating all my meals in the kitchen or living room. But last night something drew me back. Maybe it was curiosity, maybe it was the loneliness of eating alone for the past 3 days. Or maybe it was something else entirely. I made dinner and sat down at the table at exactly 7:25, waiting to see what would happen. At 7:28, they appeared as usual. But this time, there was an empty chair pulled out right next to where I was sitting. The family that materialized was the same one from that first night in March. The man in the blue button-down, the woman with the ponytail, and their 2 kids. But now they were looking at me expectantly, like they were waiting for me to say something. The little girl, the one who had been complaining about math homework all those months ago, looked right at me and said, "Are you going to eat with us tonight? We saved you a plate." And there it was, right in front of the empty chair. A plate of the same casserole they were eating, still steaming hot. I don't know what's happening in this house. I don't know if I'm losing my mind, if there's something supernatural going on, or if there's some other explanation that I haven't considered yet. But I do know one thing. Tonight, when 7:28 rolls around, I'm going to pull out that chair and sit down with whatever family appears. Because after 4 months of watching from the sidelines, I think it's time I joined the conversation. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe I am part of the family now. And honestly, after eating alone for so long, the idea of having dinner companions every night doesn't seem so scary anymore. Even if they might not be entirely real. I'll let you know how it goes. That is, assuming I'm still here to tell you about it tomorrow.